The Chicken Asylum, an Alex Reynolds mystery. Author, Fred Hunter. Publisher, St. Martin's, Griffin, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 12. When Peter got home from work, I spirited him upstairs for a private conversation. While he changed clothes, I filled him in on what Nelson had to say. By the time I had finished, Peter was in jeans and a wine-colored t-shirt, sitting on a corner of our bed and staring up at me soberly. They would send James back? Yes, I replied. If you could believe it, Nelson didn't sound very happy about it. Peter's right eyebrow arched attractively. Really? He's one surprise after another. He thought about this for a second, then said matter-of-factly, Nelson's a good man. I folded my arms. That does it. Does what? If either you or Mother give me one more shock on this case, I'm going to have to start taking nitroglycerin. What the hell do you mean Nelson's a good man? He looked genuinely surprised. You don't think so? That's beside the point. You're the one who's always so distrustful of Nelson. Now you sit here and tell me he's a good man. Next thing I know, you'll be telling me Saddam Hussein is just misunderstood. Alex, we've been working for Nelson off and on for a long time now. I don't agree with everything he does. I don't like a lot of what he does, but I think he's proven to us that he's at least honest. I dropped down on the bed beside him. You're right. It really is like Murder, She Wrote. What? Peter exclaimed, laughing. I mean, all those years Jessica Fletcher was solving murders week after week, and the police still didn't take her seriously. I always thought one day some detective would tell her he didn't want her interference, and she would come back with, do you know how many cases I've solved? The bemused expression didn't leave his face. What are you talking about? Just that you're right. Nelson has proven himself. He still doesn't usually tell us much, but I think he's honest. Yeah, if only we could trust him, I said with a sardonic laugh. This whole thing seems to be about trust. I rested my cheek on my left hand. I know. Nelson said if he found he couldn't trust us, he'd cut us loose. And I don't even know what he means by that, because I'm sure he believes we've helped James. So you would think he'd already know he can't trust us, and no matter how he feels about James personally, we can't trust Nelson to help us because he would have to take James in. He told us that much. I don't know whether or not we can trust James. I've done so many about faces on that one that I've practically given myself whiplash. And I'm not even sure I can trust my own judgment anymore. I paused for a second to marshal a little courage. But Peter, I have to go with what I feel, and I really feel we need to find James and help him. Even though he might have run off to join his friends in the jihad? Until I know what happened to him, I'm not going to know what to believe. He looked me in the eye. All right. I breathed a sigh of relief. If we're going to go on, then there's one thing I'm sure of. The one person we can't trust is Mother. What? Peter exclaimed. You've got to be kidding. No, I'm not. Nelson made it damn clear how dangerous this is. I didn't tell Mother about asking Stevie to try the redial thing. After dinner, we'll go over to his place and see if he came up with anything, but I don't want Mother to know anything about it. We have to protect her. We have to protect her? May I remind you how many times she's pulled your nuts out of the fire? And mine. Because they happened to be with yours at the time? Oh, shut up, I said. And don't say anything. To Mother, I mean. The awkwardness of our meals with James were nothing compared to the villainesque dinner we had that night. It was like the first time I'd eaten with Peter's family. About 6 months after we first met, I felt I was under divine scrutiny for any sign of flaws, unless I proved to be an unfit companion for their cherished son. As a result, I developed an irrational fear that one of my elbows would jut out involuntarily and knock over a serving dish, or that I would miss my mouth with my fork and gouge out my eye. The fact that his parents are lovely people and did absolutely nothing to make me feel that way made no difference. That's the way it was with Mother at dinner that evening. She didn't do anything out of the ordinary, but I just knew she was keeping me under observation. We opted for takeout Chinese that night over the fried rice and mushu pork. Mother conducted something of a postmortem of the case as it stood. Peter occasionally interjected something, and I mutely nodded in agreement, thinking it was better not to say anything at all rather than run the risk of betraying something by the tone of my voice. Though my eyes never left my plate, I could feel Mother's boring into me as the meal wore on. Finally, she laid her fork down on her plate, rested her elbows on the table, and propped her chin on her hands, turning an inquiring eye on me. "You're very quiet this evening." "I am," I said, looking up and attempting to appear surprised. "Yes, unnaturally so. Is anything the matter?" No. I was just listening to you and thinking." "About what?" "Just about what you were saying." "I see," she said, narrowing her eyes at me. And then suddenly she brightened and reached for the bowl of fried rice as she spooned some onto her plate. She said, "Well, all in all, I think we've come to an end." I frowned. "You do?" "Of course, darling. Much as I hate to admit it, I think Larry is right." "You do?" "Yes. This is much too much for us. And this business of James disappearing, I have to agree that it doesn't look good for him." "But you've never shrunk from danger before," I cried out when I received a sharp kick in the right shin under the table. It was Peter's way of reminding me that I didn't want Mother to be involved. There was a gleam in her eye when she said, "That's true. But you see, part of wisdom is knowing when you're in over your head. This is just too dangerous for us. We need to leave it to Nelson and his lot." Yes, you're right." I was surprised and suspicious, but if her reluctance to continue was genuine, it would make it infinitely easier for us to go on without her. After dinner, we helped her with the dishes, trying to appear as if we weren't in a hurry. Then I announced that we were going to visit Stevie. "He was really in a state about losing James," I explained. "We should spend a little time with him, make sure he's okay." "Are you sure that's wise?" Mother said. "We're still being watched. I thought you didn't want anyone to know about Stevie." It doesn't matter now. They've had a tail on him ever since he left the store this morning, so they already know about him. Besides, James is gone and Stevie doesn't know where he is." "Oh, well," she said with a faint smile. "Whatever you think is best." I looked at her long and hard. "We really are going to Stevie's." "I understand that," she said, knitting her eyebrows. "Because I agree with you. You know, about the danger." "I know. And we don't have a way to find James anyway." "I know." Peter applied a gentle pressure to the small of my back, guiding me away as he whispered, "Say goodnight, Gracie." "Have a nice time," Mother said with a wave. As we headed down the front steps, I said, "I don't like the way she said that. All she said was have a nice time." "I know, but it was way she said it. Despite what I'd said to Mother about not caring if we were followed, we kept on the lookout for a tail. Unfortunately, there were still enough people on the platform and the train itself that it would have easily been possible for someone to follow us without our knowing it, which only made me feel more apprehensive. Believing someone was watching us and not being able to see him was worse than seeing any tail smoking on a fire hydrant. It gave me that over-the-shoulder angels with tablets marking down all your sins feeling. Well, at least I know one thing. Mother's not following us. I would have spotted her. She doesn't have to follow us. She knows where we're going, said Peter. She thinks she knows. Aren't we going to Stevie's? He asked with surprise. Yes, but that's not the point. It was no better when we got off the train and walked over to Clark Street. With the unceasing pedestrian traffic, an 8-foot gorilla could have followed us without our knowing, especially since in Chicago, an 8-foot gorilla could walk up the street without causing comment. As usual, the street was lined with cars, parked bumper to bumper on both sides. I don't see him, I said, pausing in the doorway to Stevie's building. Who? The guy that was following us this morning. The one that picked up Stevie at the store. Peter looked up and down the street. Neither do I. Maybe he really was an agent. He had to be one. He was trying too hard to look normal. After being buzzed in, we rode the creaky elevator up to Stevie's place. Have you heard anything yet? He asked anxiously as he led us into the apartment. He looked paler than usual. Nothing, I said, but that could be good news. At least we know the authorities haven't got him. We sat in the places we'd occupied on our last visit. Stevie's hands kept moving in a way Mother would have referred to as nervy. He would drum them on the sofa cushion, then on his legs, then on the cushions again, always keeping them in motion. Has anyone been here to talk to you? Peter asked. No. Why? I hate to tell you this, I said, but you were followed from the store this morning. No way! His eyes widened. You might have been, Peter amended. You didn't notice anyone? I asked. No, Steve said. Is he still there? We didn't see anybody, said Peter. I think you were wrong, honey. Why? Because if they'd followed him home, they would have questioned him. Question me? Stevie looked not unlike a startled puppy. Maybe not, I said to Peter. They might have just wanted to see if James came out. They wouldn't wait if they think he's a terrorist. A terrorist? Steve exclaimed, going noticeably whiter. Don't worry, he's not a terrorist, I said, suddenly feeling like I was on the wrong end of my own conversation. At least, we don't think he is. We don't know, said Peter. We're trying to find out. It's just, since the gunman tried to kill him, the feds seem to think. A gunman! There's a gunman! There was now no color whatsoever in Stevie's face. Oh, don't worry. He's dead, I said offhandedly. Oh, that makes me feel much better. I looked at Peter. You know, I don't think I realized until just now how commonplace the ridiculous situations we get involved in seem to us anymore. Someone tried to kill him, Stevie said, trying to bring me back on track. Peter sat forward in his chair and took charge of the explanation. Yes, a few nights ago, someone who may have been a terrorist group tried to kill him. Oh, my Jesus in heaven, what have you guys got me mixed up in? I suddenly had a sour feeling in the pit of my stomach. Another thing I had only just realized was how blithely we'd gotten our friend into something that was potentially dangerous. I'd have to find time to feel guilty about that later. We told you, I said. Yeah, but I didn't believe it. I shrugged. I can't help that. We told you the truth. He shook his head. This is crazy. Now you know what married life is like, said Peter. I wrinkled my nose at him, then turned back to Stevie. Look, you're not in any danger. You never were. That group doesn't even know about us. So they couldn't possibly know we delivered James to you. This seemed to calm him somewhat. But you think that sweet young thing is... We don't know, said Peter. We didn't believe he was, but then he disappeared from here. We don't know why else he would do that. You're sure nobody broke in and took him? I asked. You've seen the door. Nobody battered it down, Stevie said with a tisk. And we don't know why he would leave. You see, Stevie, the only thing we know about James are what the government has told us, which is questionable, and what James has said himself, which is also questionable, because we don't know if he was telling us the truth or just saying anything to win us over. I heaved a frustrated sigh. It would help if we knew for certain that he told us the truth about something. Well, Peter said after a slight pause, we know he didn't lie about being gay. I glanced at Stevie, then back at Peter. I don't know. Agent Frederick said these guys would do anything to get what they wanted. Stevie was shaking his head again. Oh, no. He's gay, all right. Terrorist or not. There's some things a straight boy would not do, even if he thought he had to. So, when James... He broke off and looked from Peter to me. The color rushed back into his cheeks. Let's just say he's gay. All right. So he's gay, I said. And in case you haven't noticed, he's very, very sweet and very, very vulnerable. I know. I hope he's not a terrorist. Stevie huffed. Alex, you're always so gloomy. I prefer to think the best. I couldn't. Well, I just can't. I can't think he's one of them. And I don't want to think of him out there in the city all alone and not knowing where to turn. I know, I said, not sure whether or not I really did know. Did you try your automatic redial? Yes, he replied with a roll of his eyes. But all I got was a machine with someone babbling in one of those skippity-doo languages. Damn, I said. The message didn't say what phone number it was? He curled his lips at me. I don't speak skippity-doo. I was at a loss for a moment, then had an idea. Wait a minute. Have you got any calls since you got home? No. And there were no messages on your machine. Alex, if you're trying to imply I'm unpopular, I really don't need... It's important. No, there were no calls, no messages. Good. Hand me the phone. He picked it up from the end table and passed it to me. What are you going to do? Peter asked. Stevie got a machine when he redialed the number. Maybe James did too. If the person had to call him back, maybe we can star 69 his ass. Hey, there's a charge for that, said Stevie. I'll pay it. He handed me a pad and pencil as I punched the 3 buttons. I said a little prayer of thanks when the mechanical voice rattled off the last number I dialed. I scribbled it on the pad, then hung up. Look familiar? I said, holding the pad up for Stevie to see. But that doesn't mean anything, honey. It could be someone that just didn't leave a message. No, my machine would blink if somebody did that, said Stevie. We sat and looked at each other for a few seconds, then I said, well, we could call it and see if we get the same machine that Stevie got. He called during the day. Peter said, you might not get a machine. You might get a person. I sighed, then perked up again. Oh, wait! I picked up the receiver and began to dial. Who are you calling now? That number the phone company has. The one that gives you the name and address that goes with the phone number? An automated voice answered the phone and instructed me to enter a number. I tapped the number into the dial. After another pause, a second automated voice, this one spliced together, provided the information. I jotted it down. Who was it? Peter asked as I hung up. The name that goes with the number is Al Faisal. The address is 631 North Kessler. Kessler? Where's that? We both looked to Stevie. He did one of his Tim Curry eye rolls and said, Oh, I suppose now you want a map. He got up and went into the kitchen, then reappeared, carrying a street map of Chicago, which he handed to me. Peter and I opened it and scanned the street guide for Kessler. When we found it, we did a quick search of the map. Here it is, said Peter, tapping his index finger on the spot. Just north of Grand Avenue, next to the river. No wonder we've never heard of it. It's only a block long. I thought for a minute as I looked at the map. We'll have to take a cab. You're not going down there, said Stevie. I looked up. Of course we are. That's insane. You can't do that. We're only going to look around. We're not going to storm the battlements single-handedly. Have you lost your ever-loving mind? Terrorist. Gunman. Hello. What do you think we should do? I said, challenging him to come up with a better idea. Call the authorities. Tell them to go there. The authorities are one of the groups after James. He went blank for a moment, then faded back onto the couch. Oh, darn. That's right. But could you tell them what you know? Then maybe they'd go and see if they can find him, and everything else could get worked out later. They believe he's a terrorist. We tell them anything, and they'll arrest him. But Alex, sweetie... You can't go there alone. Oh, I won't be alone. Peter will be with me. Peter gave Stevie his most long-suffering look. Now you really know what married life is like. Once back on the street, we quickly caught a cab and told him where we wanted to go. The driver grunted and started the meter, and then made a U-turn and headed back to Beaumont to get on Lakeshore Drive. I wish I could say this is the craziest thing we've ever done, said Peter as the cab wove in and out of traffic. But there's just too many to choose from anymore. What exactly do you hope to find in this place? James, in a pink pinafore, cooking dinner for the man he fell so madly in love with that he ran off with him on the spot and simply forgot to tell someone that he was going. He looked at me. Barring that, I shrugged. An arsenal. How are you even supposed to find out if he's there? Knock on the door and ask for him. I don't know, I said wearily. Look, I really just want to see the place, at least for the time being. Somehow I think I'll know if James is inside. Peter raised an eyebrow. That's sort of pushing the limits of gaydar, isn't it? You know what I mean. We'll just have to play it by ear. Oh, God, he moaned. We reached Grand Avenue, and the cab driver headed west. Both sides of the street seemed to be lined with giant cranes amidst massive, swiftly rising building projects from the lake all the way to the river. I'd been aware that there was a lot of buildings going on in this area, but I had no idea of the extent of it. It looked like Chicago was rapidly being turned into New York. If that stretch of road was a surprise, my teeth almost fell out of my head when we crossed the river. What used to be a run-down industrial neighborhood was now peppered with luxury high-rises and wildly expensive lofts, all with a panoramic view of train yards, expressways, and the river. which at that locale looked not unlike the Black Lagoon. The gentrification ended abruptly just before Halstead, where we had the driver let us out. We didn't want him to take us all the way to the address or even to Kessler for fear our arrival would be noticed. That area of Grand was deserted except for a few derelicts, which were either too drunk or too nuts to even bother us for money. We walked west and found Kessler, a couple of blocks over from Halstead. We stopped beside the dirty red brick building on the corner and cautiously peered around the side to check the layout of the street. As it had appeared on the map, Kessler was barely a block long, truncated by both railroad tracks and the expressway, a concrete canal from which a glow emanated upward. It was a good thing, too, because the streetlights were out. "I don't see anybody," I said. "Me either." I looked back down Grand, and no cars behind. At least we know Mother hasn't followed us. Under the circumstances, that doesn't make me feel better. Shall we?" Peter sighed. "Go on." We skirted the corner of the building and cautiously headed up Kessler. On the left side, there was a deserted, low-lying factory of some sort, and on the right were three houses so ramshackle they looked like the last ones left after a nuclear war. The first two were boarded up with plywood, much of which was rotted and falling away. We stopped at the edge of the second one to look at the third. It was separated from the other two by a broad dirt lot and wasn't boarded up, but looking like it should have been. There were lights on in the front room of the first floor. Tattered curtains hung limply in the windows, and every now and then a human shadow would glide across them, waffling in the folds and tiers. The windows were low enough that we could see inside if we stood on tiptoe. But I didn't know if I had the courage to do that. The second floor and the back of the house were dark. Two cars, which could have been politely referred to as jalopies, were parked by the curb. "So much for the pinafore theory," said Peter. "Christ, it looks like something out of Sleepy Hollow." "Somehow I don't think Tim Burton's in there." "What now?" "Get a closer look." "I was afraid you were going to say that." He gestured toward the lot. "How do we do it? This approach is awfully public." I thought for a minute. "Let's try the back way." We doubled back and ducked into the narrow, dark path between the first two houses. This was the one place on the forsaken properties where there was grass growing. Even though it was tall and dried out, I almost took a header when my foot came in contact with a soft mass on the ground. I stopped and nudged the mass with my foot, and it let out a soft groan. "Oh my God! Are you all right?" I said to the prostrate figure that I could barely see. He moaned, smacked his lips, and turned over on his side. The unlovely aroma of alcohol and urine wafted upwards, sending me reeling backward onto Peter. Once I'd gotten my heart to calm down, I stepped over the drunk, and Peter followed me. Just before reaching the back of the building, I heard a scurrying noise inside the second house. It made my heart leap again, something I certainly didn't need it to do while it was pounding so loudly. There was no more cover behind the houses than there had been in the front, but at least there was a little less glow. What once had been fairly vast yards were now expanses of dirt spotted with clumps of dead grass, sliced at a diagonal by the expressway. Behind the occupied house was a large, dirty white truck, not unlike a dairy truck, only without any logos. Its cab was facing the back of the house. "I don't like the look of that," said Peter. "I don't suppose they could be delivering milk in between terrorist attacks," I said. We stayed as far away from the incessant aura as we could, keeping close to the back of the second house, until we worked up the nerve to cross the back lot. "Come on," I said, hunching over as I started to cross. It wasn't easy to do that stealthily. I had a feeling that if we went too far and too fast, the movement would attract the attention of whoever was in the third house. And if we moved too slowly, we'd be left out in the open longer. Peter moved quickly behind me, although the rough dirt crunched beneath our feet. The sound was masked by the continued drone of traffic on the expressway. When we reached the back of the truck, we waited and listened for any sign that we'd been heard. Once we were fairly certain we hadn't, I started to examine the latch on the back of the truck. It had a large metal lever that opened by being pulled upward. I put my right hand on it and tugged. "What are you doing?" Peter said, putting his hand on the scroll-locked door. "I want to see what's inside." "Are you crazy? Do you know how much noise that'll make?" "It doesn't matter," I said with a disappointed sigh. "It's locked." He didn't exhale until I let go of the lever. "What now?" he asked. I turned one eye around the corner of the truck. "Come on," I said, waving him after me. We ran to the back of the house and plastered ourselves against the back wall of a porch, whose torn and twisted screens belied the term screened in. "I feel like I'm on the rotor," I whispered. Peter turned to me in the quasi-darkness. "Alex, if you make me laugh, I'll kill you before we have a chance." "You know how I get when I'm nervous." "Yes, I do. What do we do now?" "Try to see inside?" This idea was met with pointed silence. "You didn't think I was going to settle for just looking at the outside of the place, did you?" "I thought you said you could feel James's presence." The mildly snide tone betrayed his own tension. "How do you intend to do it?" I did a slow take. "How do I intend to do it? Don't you mean we?" "That was implicit," he said after a beat. "Well, I suppose if we're going to look in, we're going to have to move." Hold on." I turned around and slowly inched my way up so that I could just see over the ledge. Through the screen above me, the porch itself was empty, the floor badly warped. On the interior wall, there was a good-sized window looking into the kitchen, visible in the dim glow seeping in from the front of the house. Next to the window was a door with another window a little higher up. I lowered myself back down. "There's a window in there. I think we might be able to see into the front." "Okay." With me in the lead, we edged our way around the corner of the porch, where 4 wooden steps led to a screen door. I crawled up the stairs and reached for the handle, which was badly rusted. Even though I tried to be very careful, it made a deep grating noise as I turned it. "Alex?" Peter whispered wearily. "I know." When the handle was halfway down, the door unlatched. I pulled it open cautiously. Unfortunately, there was a large spring running from its left side, back to the jamb, meant to snap the door shut. At irregular intervals, the spring let out a metallic poing that probably wasn't as loud as I thought it was, but even so, each poing made my heart skip a beat. When the door was open enough for me to pass through, I looked over my shoulder at Peter and whispered, "Stay here and hold it open while I go in. I don't want to risk moving it too much." "Be careful." I crept onto the porch, the floor of which creaked under my weight so loudly that I was sure the occupants of the house couldn't help but hear it. But when I stopped and held in place, I realized that I'd been so focused on the noise I was making, I hadn't noticed the noise coming from inside. Voices were raised to a shouting level in a very heated argument that sounded as if it involved several people, all apparently speaking Arabic, or whatever it was. It wasn't English. I moved up to the window and peered inside. The kitchen looked dusky in the scant light coming from a doorway in the far right corner. Beside the doorway was a door which was closed. Dirty dishes were heaped in the sink, and pots caked with food were piled haphazardly on the stove. I couldn't see James or anyone else from that vantage point, so I decided to move up to the window in the door, which gave a clearer view of the inner doorway. Once at the door, I slowly inched my eyes up to the window. From there, I could see the interior wall of the room beyond, across which wildly gesticulating shadows were dancing. With the uncomfortable half-crouch I had to maintain in order to see through the windows, I wasn't sure how long I could stay there, but I hoped I could hold out long enough to see at least one of the people inside, if not James. I was just about to lower myself when one of the shadows shifted, and then suddenly its owner came into view. He was shouting angrily as he reached the wall. Then he turned around and rested his back against it. He was an incredibly intense man, about 30 years old, wearing black pants and a white shirt that was soaked with sweat. The shirt clung to his body, revealing a muscular, if underfed, torso. He had wavy black hair down to his shoulders, a thick beard, and skin about the color of a football. He spat words like a rapid-fire machine gun at the unseen occupants of the room. And then, with an abrupt, dismissive gesture at them, he turned toward the kitchen. I dropped down in terror, my back pressed against the door. After a second, the kitchen lights came on. I looked over at Peter, who was still holding the screen door. If the man happened to look out the window, he would surely see that the screen door was open. But I was in no better position. If he opened the back door, I would fall at his feet. I made a mental note that if we got out of this case alive, I should have an EKG. My heart skipping had been bad enough, but now it had completely stopped. I heard the sucking sound of a refrigerator door opening and the rattle of bottles within. Then the door closed, and the lights went off. The man's heavy footsteps retreated. I heaved a sigh of relief and could see Peter doing the same. "Alex," he whispered anxiously, "let's get out of here." I hesitated. I'd really hoped we'd see some evidence of James's presence, although at the same time I was hoping we wouldn't. I wasn't ready to give up yet, but couldn't see how we could go any further. We certainly couldn't go inside. Peter's brows were knit with concern. With a shrug, I moved back over to him and went down the steps. He lagged behind, closing the door more slowly than I thought humanely possible. And then he joined me at the foot of the stairs, and we edged back around the corner of the porch. "Could you see anything?" Peter asked. "Just a guy who looked like Jesus, only masculine." "Any sign of James?" "Mm-mm." "Then let's go. There's nothing more we can do here but get killed." "I just gotta find out if James is in there." "You've tried. Now we should call Nelson and tell him what we know. He can take it from here. And if James is in there, they'll pick him up as well." His eyebrows almost touched. "If James is in there, he deserves to be picked up." I pursed my lips and sighed. It was probably true, but I still wanted to prove it. Too much of what James had done didn't make sense. "Just because he called here doesn't mean he came here," I said. I just want to find out." "How?" "You couldn't see him." "Just go around the other side of the house. Maybe there's a window over there we can use." He sighed, but he followed me. Keeping low, we moved across to the other end of the porch. I peeked around the corner, and when I saw that the coast was clear, we went around it. Just past the end of the house was an oblong black hole with concrete steps leading down to a door. Although shielded from the expressway's glow, I thought I could see a pane of glass near the top. "Look," I said, keeping my voice low. "A cellar." I started down the steps, but Peter grabbed my arm. "What are you doing?" "I'm going down to have a look." "Alex, your mother isn't Janet Leigh, and you're not Vera Mills. Remember what happened to her when she went down in the cellar?" I smiled. "Have I ever told you you bear a striking resemblance to John Gavin?" His eyes narrowed. "You know it's hard to accept flattery from someone I think is insane." "I'm just going to take a look." I pulled away from him, but not in time to miss seeing him roll his eyes yet again. I went down the steps quickly and quietly, and despite his protest, Peter was right behind me, much to my relief. The narrow pit smelled like dank earth. My heart sank when I found the cardboard had been taped up over the inside of the window. "Well, that's that," said Peter. I put my hand on the door jamb. It was so loose it jiggled in my hand. "What are you doing now?" "Thought I might as well try, see if it's..." I broke off as the door fell open about an inch. "Locked." Peter looked startled and even less pleased than he had a moment earlier. "Alex, you know how bad a sign that is?" "Maybe it doesn't lock. Look at this place." "Let's pretend for a moment that it does lock," he said, insisting on being rational. "Why would a group of terrorists leave the door unlocked?" "Is this a riddle?" "I'm serious." "I don't know. Maybe they just forgot." "Or maybe they're planning to move something out," Peter said. "Maybe into a waiting truck." I looked at him for a moment. "Maybe we should see what's inside." "You're crazy!" "We've come this far." I pushed the door open a little more and carefully stepped inside. The cellar was nearly black. All of the high-up half windows were covered with cardboard. The only light coming in was the little that could get through the door. I could just barely make out piles of sacks, forming an aisle down the center, leading to a wooden staircase to the first floor. The air was choked with a heavy chemical stench. Overhead, we could hear footsteps, walking to and fro as if several people were pacing chaotically. The sound was limited to one area that, I guessed, corresponded to the room where the lights were on. The argument was still going on, although coming from above, the voices were a bit more muffled. Peter and I stood in the darkness near the door and listened for several seconds. "I don't hear James," I said. "You can't tell from down here." We slowly moved into the room, going down the aisle and struggling to make out the writing on the sacks, but it was impossible to see anything, let alone read. "We could strike a match if we had one," I said with a low laugh. "You know what happens when they do that in the movies?" "What does that smell?" I said, wrinkling my nose. "It smells like shit." I could feel Peter freeze behind me. His hand shot out and grabbed my shoulder, stopping me in place. "Not shit, Alex. Fertilizer." I turned around. "Well, fertilizer is..." My mouth dropped open. "Oh, shit." "Exactly." Unless these guys are farmers who've really lost their way, they're planning big trouble. "That's why they call them terrorists, honey. I think we should get out of here." "I think you're right." Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.